Hello and welcome to Torah Today Ministries. My name is Grant Luton,
And I'm Robin.
my lovely bride, and we are excited to start this new series called Parsing the Portion. And probably most of all of you know that the Torah is divided up into 54 weekly Torah portions. And today is a very special day. What's today, Robin?
Today is Simchat Torah.
What does that mean?
Well, it's a new beginning, isn't it? It's when we start over with Genesis 1:1 and the very first portion in this beautiful cycle that he's provided for us.
That's right. Simchat Torah means rejoicing of the Torah, joy of the Torah. And in synagogues all over the world today, they'll be dancing with the Torah, parading around the bima, and they'll read the last bit of Deuteronomy, roll the scroll back to Genesis chapter 1, and read part of Genesis 1. In fact, fathers will hold their children in their arms if they're too small, and the kids all come up and surround the bima, and they'll start in Genesis 1, and the reader will say the first word, and all the kids will repeat the word. He'll say the second word, they'll all repeat that second word, just to rejoice in this new beginning. So we've chosen today, Simchat Torah, to start this parsing the portion. Parsing the portion, not parsing the portion, is it? Yeah, so you have to it's still early in the morning. You have to get used to me. And there's no video for this because Robin and I, as we do these together, we may be on the road traveling, and so we don't have to worry about cameras and all of that. We can just take our little recorder with us, and we can record these wherever we're at.
Right, that's the idea.
Yeah. Now, we've been discussing Torah portions for years. What kind of benefits have you seen from that weekly discussion of what we're reading together?
Well, we never run out of things to talk about and things that matter to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's really enriched our relationship, and it makes life even more of an adventure. It's been quite an adventure being married to you anyway. But we always do have something to talk about, and we just never run out.
It's never run out. And we've done this for probably, how many years? 30 years or more now? And do you ever find it getting boring reading the same Torah portion year after year after year?
No, and I think that's one of the things that keeps reminding me that this book isn't just a book, but it's living. Because every cycle that we begin again, it's as if I've read it, but I haven't read it. And things that I've seen before, suddenly I see.
Yeah. And something we've both found too, I know you've mentioned this many times, is that whatever we read in that week's portion seems to be what we're going through during that week. It's a living, as you said, the Word of God is alive. And so being alive, being something that is so infused with God's Spirit, it knows what we're going through week by week. And it speaks to those things.
It's always, always relevant. And the word portion reminds me of a portion of a meal. So every morning when I sit and I think, what is my portion today, Father, as I wait for him to feed me, it's as if he gives me the exact nutrients to the exact degree that he knows that I'm going to need it for the day ahead, because he's already there in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're the ones who are dwelling in time, but God does not have that restriction on him, does he? He time dwells within him. Well, anyways, this first Torah portion is called Barasheit, after the first word of Genesis, which means in the beginning. And it goes from Genesis 1:1 up through Genesis 6, verse 8.
There's so much packed in this.
It's too much.
It's frustrating. We could talk a whole year about Genesis 1:1.
Oh, we certainly could.
Let alone the first 6 chapters.
Well, won't you start? I know you mentioned there's some things in chapter 1 that stood out to you this week. So why don't you kick it off, Robin?
I think what really spoke to me, Grant, is I was opening the book of Genesis again for probably the 26th year in a row to approach it this way, is realizing that the very first thing that God spoke was, "Let there be light." Those were the first words that are recorded for us in the Torah. And so that in and of itself is so significant. And I started to think about how light is the first of God's creations that he describes for us. And it's the closest thing that he created to himself, which is the source of all creation, because he is light.
Yes.
And I started to think about how we emanate from him, and he speaks us into existence. Therefore, because he's light and he's our source, every person deep down is always longing for light.
Yes.
The creation desires spiritual light.
That's right. It's almost as if when God said those words, "Let there be light," Yihi Or in Hebrew, just 2 words, 5 letters. It's almost like he's saying, let the universe see me. Let the universe understand. It's 6 letters, by the way, not 5. But it's almost like I am light, but I want this, who I am, to shine forth into this creation that I'm bringing about. Because I want my creation to see me, to know me, to understand me, and be close to me.
And I started to think about the properties of light. I mean, what is light? It's not something that we can hold in our hand. It's energy, isn't it? And it's eternal.
Yes.
And it keeps us able to navigate our way instead of bumping into things and hurting ourselves and hurting other people.
Yeah.
Darkness is something that most of us don't seek out and enjoy to any great extent. Right.
Yeah, light is energy, and God's name, Yud He Vav He, we know that however it's pronounced, we know that it is a verb. It's constantly doing. But what's interesting too, and I don't want to get all scientific, but light is also a particle. Mm-hmm. It's something that has a physical nature to it. Pick up any book on quantum physics and any beginner's book. It'll always start with the experiment that was performed many years ago, and people do it in classrooms now, that proves that light behaves like an energy wave, but it also behaves like a particle, like something physical. Mm-hmm. But isn't that just like God, mm-hmm. who is the God of the seen and the unseen world, mm-hmm. of the physical and the spiritual world? Mm-hmm. And when he created us in his image, he made us, as C.S. Lewis says, amphibians. We dwell in a spiritual world and we dwell in a physical world. So it's amazing that the nature of light reflects these same attributes.
Well, my musings aren't quite as scientific, but I do know one thing, that if I'm in a completely dark room and I light a very small match, it takes just a small bit of light to dispel what seems like a lot of darkness.
Yes. And
that is the nature of light, spiritually as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. It's God doesn't tell us to be great lights. He just says that we are lights. Mm. And, when you're talking, I remember when we visited Mammoth Cave years ago. We were down in one of the caverns. There were probably about 25 people on the tour. And they said, okay, everybody just, we're going to turn out the lights and make sure your cell phones are shut down or in your pocket. And let's just turn out the lights to experience total blackness. And so they did. It was so strange because you could put your hand right up in front of your face and you could not see a single thing. And then the guide pulled up his sleeve. Here he is in this cavern. And he had a watch where the numbers glowed. Mm-hmm. And it was almost like that lit up the room.
I remember that.
Just that little bit of light. And then as people who had similar watches did the same, the whole place lit up. Yet how much light comes off of a watch face? Hardly any at all. But in total darkness, a little light accomplishes great things.
And then, Grant, as I was thinking about how we as his creation all have a longing to reconnect with our source and to seek out light, obviously the question comes, well, then why isn't the world full of light? Why is there so much darkness in the world? And my mind went to Isaiah 20, and it says, Isaiah 5, verse 20, where the prophet says, "Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter." And that is, unfortunately, the familiar world that we live in. And then the next question that comes, of course, is, well, then how did that happen? I mean, God spoke light. How did everything get inside out and upside down? And the verse in 2 Corinthians that describes our enemy, who disguises himself as an angel of light, came to my mind. And so he knew how to deceive Eve. He disguised himself as light and told her that she would be more enlightened if she believed the lie.
Yeah.
And that same lie is what has created the situation we're in, where the world calls good evil and evil good.
Yeah.
Right?
That's so true. And you know, when we talk about the darkness in the world today, and there's so much, so the media is so filled with lies and distortions, and entertainment, basically, almost all of it is based upon lies, on as presenting evil things as if they bring life and pleasure and joy, denigrating good things.
It feels like there's a greater appetite for darkness in this world right now, and it's a troubling thing.
Yeah. But with that said, a person's inner world can be filled with light.
That's the hope.
Yes. And the people who are filled with light can always recognize other people who are filled with light. And so even in this dark world, we can be lights to it. So our responsibility is to be that light, and the responsibility of others is to open their eyes to perceive the light.
Right.
A lot of people stumble around through this world with their eyes shut fast, and they're blind. They're stumbling around in the dark.
Well, this whole conversation makes the first few verses in the book of John all the more amazing. Because the first opening words in that chapter 1 is in the beginning, which should remind us of Torah portion 1. And in the beginning was what? The Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. This one was in the beginning with God. And we go down, and it says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men.
Yes.
It's like God relit his creation with Messiah.
Amen. That's so great. And I love that phrase where it says his life, the life was the light of men. I know too many believers, they want to be light in the world just by speaking theology, talking theology and quoting Bible verses. But their lives are not light.
Right.
Their life has to be light if they want to be lights to other people. And, quoting the Bible verse is like handing someone a flashlight, but it isn't light itself unless it comes from a life that is a light with the life of God. And so we need to live the light and not just think that by putting a Bible verse on the bumper of our car, we're going to be evangelizing the world. Well, there's some other. I'm just looking at the clock here, but I don't want to cut you off. Finish your thought.
No.
But I know you had something else from early in the portion you wanted to share.
Why don't you take your turn next?
Well, the couple things I wanted to share come from the end of the portion.
Okay.
Which we can do, but so what do you want to do? You want me to?
Well, I'm still near the beginning.
Let's continue with what you have.
So briefly, is there any such thing as briefly when I'm sharing my thoughts? The word boundaries, Grant, came to my mind as I was studying and reading this portion, because when when God, our Creator, placed us in this world, he took Adam and put him in a garden. And the garden had boundaries, didn't
Yes,
it?
it sure did.
Not only physical boundaries that made it part of where he was to live and work and prune and thrive, but there was a spiritual boundary, which we know had to do with what tree not to touch. And so I started to really consider what a gift boundaries are. Boundaries are the thing that give us the ability to enjoy life. It makes life better.
Brings order.
It does. But I think what happens is the liar speaks a lie into our mind, and he convinces us that those boundaries that the Torah sets for our life in this garden, in this world, is going to cheat us out of something good. And that we're going to have not enough if we do submit to the boundaries that he sets for us.
Yeah.
And if you think about our culture, it's pretty anti-boundary, isn't it?
It is.
And self-indulgence and no boundaries is the order of the day. And people aren't happy. People aren't content.
Right. And that's confusion.
It is.
God is not the author of confusion. Yeah, it's God. Every pleasure was invented by God. Invented for us. Created for us to enjoy, to make our life abundant and full. So when it comes to the pleasure of food, you know how much I like food. God placed some boundaries, not to reduce our enjoyment, but to maximize it. So he gives us boundaries called the kosher laws. And when it comes to sex, God says, this is a wonderful gift. I want you to enjoy it. I want to bring life into the world. But there's a boundary around it called the covenant of marriage. And it needs to be practiced only within those boundaries. And we could go on to anything like alcohol or speech or clothing, even ownership of your property. There need to be boundaries to maximize peace and order and abundance and fullness. And
well, I think that
work together.
I think that was demonstrated even when he was creating the world as a place for man to dwell in. He gave boundaries to the seas, and he said, you don't go past here. We see what happens when the ocean does, in fact, go past the boundaries. We have a tsunami, and we have flooding, and we have disaster. And when he placed the stars and the planets, the sun and the moon in the heavens, even then, we see scientifically that if the sun was a little bit closer or a little bit further, it would bring destruction to us. Everything has its boundaries to give us life and give us the pleasure that he really intends for us to have.
That's right. It's the Goldilocks syndrome. You know, one porridge is too hot, one's too cold, but this one's just right. And so extremes are never good things. There has to be this perfect balance, and that's what boundaries provide. And also, you mentioned how in the creation, in days 1, 2, 3, there's separation. Day 1 separates light from darkness. Day 2 separates the waters above from the waters below. Day 3 separates the seas from the dry lands. There's separation. There's order going on. But 4, 5, and 6, he begins to fill the things he separated. So
he creates the habitation.
Yes.
And then he puts life in it.
Right. Yeah. Just like he created the Garden of Eden, then he placed man in the garden. Man wasn't created in the Garden of Eden. He's created outside the garden. But then God placed him in the garden that he had made for him. So God is always doing this. He's dividing and then multiplying. He's separating and then filling. He even separated Adam into two, formed a bride out of one half of Adam. Then he brought the two back together. And that return that reconnection was so much better than the original connection.
I had a note jotted in the margin of my Bible from, I think, probably a teaching years ago, Grant. And it says that the key to unity is order, and the key to order is separation. And I have been pondering that for the last few days, because we all want unity, but the way God brings that about often is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And he does have to separate in order to bring
That's right.
order.
That's right. It's
He even did that with humanity, masculine and feminine, which is a huge subject that we'll visit sometime. But
they want to remove all boundaries of that now, don't they?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. Should we move on? Is there something you want to finish on that?
The last thing to mention for that is that as I was sitting this morning thinking about what a gift God's boundaries are, one of my favorite chapters to visit occasionally to remind myself of the truth of this is Psalm 119. So it's a great exercise to sit and read through that chapter of Psalms and put the word instruction or even the word boundary every time you see the word law.
Yes.
And you realize that it was given not to cheat us or restrict us, but to really bring us to the potential of happiness and contentment.
That's so true. That's a good idea. Yeah, to replace that word law. I always replace it with Torah, which means instruction. But what is instruction?
Yeah.
It's showing you what is what.
Yes.
What is here, what is there. What is up, what is down. What's right, what's wrong. It's boundaries. It's all boundaries.
It is.
Yeah. Very good. You know what? You could just carry this whole series just on your own.
I don't think so.
No, I don't want to do that. Okay, all right. Okay.
As a matter of fact, we were talking together about why we need another kind of discussion added to Torah Today Ministries. I mean, you already have lots of series going and there's teaching going and it's all great stuff. Why have another conversation added to the mix? But I'm hoping that this inspires people to talk among themselves more.
Yes.
And to realize that you don't have to be a scholar. I'm here to encourage everybody. You don't need to be a scholar to really bask in the light of Torah. And also, I hope to bring a feminine voice.
Yeah.
And let us know if that is happening as you listen.
Yeah.
Because we'd like to have some feedback.
Yeah. So I've been accused of a lot of things, but feminine is not one of them.
No.
No. So I leave that to you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Well, as I mentioned, the couple of things I wanted to share just stood out to me this week as I've been reading this Torah portion come from later in the portion. So I'm looking at chapter 4.
Okay.
And the story of Cain and Abel. And as I was reading this,
questions about that.
I still have a lot of questions too. But I'm looking at verse 3. It says, after a period of time, Cain brought an offering to Adonai of the fruit of the ground. And as for Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and from their choicest. And then it says, Adonai turned or had regard for Abel and his offering. But to Cain and to his offering, he did not turn, did not have regard. And the thing that stood out to me was it said, to Abel and his offering, to Cain and his offering. So did he give regard to Abel because of his offering, or did he give regard to the offering because of Abel? Did he disregard the offering of Cain because of Cain, or disregard Cain because of his offering?
Yes to all?
What? And I started thinking, it's like, if I have regard for you, I have regard for your offering. If I have regard for your offering, I have regard for you. It's a package deal. And it just hit me that the worth of our lives, the value of our lives, all has to do with what are we sacrificing? What are we laying down? What are we giving? And over in 1 Corinthians, in the early chapters, Paul talks about the judgment we all go through as believers. And it says for every one of us, our works will be tested as by fire. In other words, God takes the sacrifice. We've taken everything we've had, all of our time, our possessions, our strength, our talents, and how have we invested them? Because investment's a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. And our lives are the sum of what we've given up, what we've given away, what we've invested in God's kingdom. I've always said that a person's life only has meaning to the degree he lays it down for others. And that just really jumped off the page at me when I was reading this. You may think, well, I may not do much for God, but God loves me so much. Well, that's true. But we were created for good works in Messiah Yeshua.
For our sake.
For our sake, for the world's sake.
Because when we use the language of sacrificing and, putting ourselves to death and laying our lives down, we immediately tend to think, well, that means I'm going to be deprived. That means my life isn't going to be very happy. It means I'm going to live a life of self-deprivation.
Yeah. And that's the enemy's lie.
Right.
Excuse me. But the truth of the matter is, it's only what is put on the altar that goes up.
That's the secret to a happy life. Well, it's funny because in verse 7, I had underlined that as well. Cain went into a major pout after his sacrifice wasn't received like his brothers. And God speaks to him. And he says, why are you angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will your countenance be lifted up? In other words, the key to overcoming your sadness and depression and misery is just do well.
Change what you're doing.
So that's exactly what you're saying.
Yes. Good advice someone gave me years ago. He said, if you don't like the way you feel, change what you're doing. And that's one of the best ways to get out of depression. Change what you're doing.
And sometimes it's a real tough first step, overcoming that inertia.
Yeah.
But every journey is taken by starting with the first step.
That's for sure. Well, we move on to chapter 6, which introduces the wickedness that resulted in the world because of Adam and Eve's bad decision. Something I'd seen before, but it just hit me anew, is this, and it takes a little background to run up to, but as you've heard me say many times, there are two main names for God that are used in the scriptures. There's Elohim, and then there's Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, which we don't know how it's pronounced, but we say Adonai, some say Hashem, which means the name. King James uses the term Jehovah, some say Yahweh, but again, we don't know how the name is pronounced. We have Elohim and Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and I'll just use the word Adonai for that. And the rabbis have said for many centuries that when you see Elohim, it's referring to God in his role of strict justice. And when you see the word Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Adonai, it's referring to God in his role of grace and mercy and patience and tolerance. Well, in the first chapter of Genesis, you only see the name Elohim used.
Okay.
I don't know, less than a dozen times, maybe 10 times. And so he created the physical creation with strict justice. So scientifically, we know that
it's precise.
It's precise. Everything's precise. And if something goes out of balance, the whole thing just falls to pieces. If the earth was closer to the sun or further away from the sun, we would either burn up or we'd all freeze. If there was more oxygen or less oxygen in the atmosphere, everything would either burn up or we wouldn't be able to sustain life. And all these precise things. So Elohim is the name it's used. In chapter 2, where we read about the creation of Adam and Eve, and in chapter 3, when we read about their downfall, the name Adonai Elohim is used. It's the mixture of his attributes of mercy as well as his attributes of justice. So because Adam and Eve sinned, The serpent was cursed. The earth was cursed. Pain was introduced in the creation. Adam and Eve had to be removed from it. But God didn't take their lives that day. In fact, he provided clothing for them. And as we see, God continues to speak. He spoke to Cain after this passage we just read. So God still interacts. He's still guiding. He's still nurturing. But there was a price to pay.
It's like that perfect intimacy that they experienced at the beginning was broken, but it wasn't shattered and destroyed.
That's
and
right.
so we're still in the process, aren't we, of
Yeah.
trying to recover degrees of that intimacy.
Ever since Genesis 3, God has been on the move to return mankind to the garden. And that's the beauty of this amazing book, the Bible, because when you get to the last couple chapters of Revelation, we're back in the garden again.
So
He succeeds.
Our whole journey is making our way back to the garden.
That's right. So when we get to chapter 6 then, this is moved quite a ways into the future, many generations further along. It says in verse 5, Adonai saw the wickedness of man was great upon the earth, and that every foundation, every yetzer of the thoughts of his heart was but evil always. And Adonai reconsidered having made man on earth, and he had heartfelt sadness. That word for sadness, same word that's used for pain with Eve and with Adam.
Yeah.
And Adonai said, I will blot out man whom I created from the face of the ground. Notice the name that's used for God? It's not Elohim. It's not the God of strict justice. This is his name of mercy.
Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh.
Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is used here. And this is why he felt such heart sickness over this sin. It was like a father's heart grieving over his wayward children. And so when we read about the flood, which comes in next week's Torah portion, and the destruction of people and of the animals, and all the death and destruction, it's the name Adonai it's used.
Even though it seems so harsh.
It seems harsh. But, I was thinking back to the first movie I ever remember seeing in the theater. It was Old Yeller. I think I was in maybe first or second grade. I remember telling all my buddies, we're going to go see Old Yeller tonight. And
Did you cry?
Oh, my goodness, yeah. It was
so tragic.
Yeah, but you think of Old Yeller, this dog that was a pain in the neck, but loved these kids, these pioneer frontier kids. And there was I believe it was a wild boar that had rabies. And it was about to attack these kids, and Old Yeller jumped in there and wrestled with this thing and bit it and fought it off. But as a result, Old Yeller got rabies. So here you've got this dog you love, but now it's frothing at the mouth. It's not itself anymore. It's not the dog it used to be. It wants to hurt and kill, and it's in pain, it's in distress, and there's nothing about this dog that it's experiencing is at all redeemable. So what do? Then the movie, out of an act of mercy, out of love for Old Yeller, the dad takes his gun and shoots him, kills him. And that's kind of the heartfelt sadness that God felt in having to put down man. He had to put him down.
Yeah, so diseased and...
Because when the foundation of your heart, the thoughts of a person's heart are evil continuously.
And that's how it's
what
described.
do you do?
Yes.
Out of mercy, you put an end. Now, this is not the end of the story for anyone, but people who are totally invested in the flesh, the end of the story for them is when the flesh dies. Because the flesh is their entire world. But for people who are spiritual, the death of the flesh is not the end of the world. And but that's another story for another time.
Yeah.
So anyways, any last minute thoughts, Robin?
Oh, we could go on all day, and this has been really fun. Psalm 36:10 has been kind of resonating in my mind. It says, "For in you is the source of life, and in your light we see light." And I think that's a great place to wrap up our conversation today, because that's the good news.
That is good news indeed. By your light we see light.
Yeah, there's no other way.
Yeah.
And then we return to our source, and life makes sense again.
Well, I can improve on that. I think that's a good place to end. So we'll be back again next week with Torah portion Noach, or Noah. And for those of you who may not have a Torah schedule, it starts in Genesis 6:9 and it ends in Genesis 11:32. And if you go online, you can Google, you can print out a Torah reading schedule so you'll know what we'll be doing each week. And so we look forward to talking to all of you again early next week. So until then,
Shalom.
shalom and God bless.